And the inevitable is now official. Elise Stefanik is now the third-ranking Republican in the House.
My focus is on unity because that's what the American people and that's what our voters deserve. I also want to thank this leadership team. I look forward to working with them in partnership, shoulder to shoulder, to make sure that we are fighting on behalf of hardworking Americans. I also want to thank President Trump for his support. He is a critical part of our Republican team.
The New York Congresswoman won a secret ballot vote overwhelmingly this morning after receiving Donald Trump's endorsement. She replaces Liz Cheney, who was ousted over her refusal to support Trump's big lie that he really won the 2020 election. And with this change, House Republicans have removed any doubt about Trump's role in their party's future. Joining me now is NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake and former RNC chairman and MSNBC political analyst Michael Steele. So, Garrett, this was all but a coronation of Elise Stefanik. What is the dynamic in the House GOP right now?
Well, I think it's coalescing around the idea that Donald Trump will remain their leader. We heard some of that from Stefanik in that press conference. I want to play a little bit of her additional remarks here and talk about it on the other side. Here was Stefanik about leadership in the Republican Party right now.
That voters determine the leader of the Republican Party, and President Trump is the leader that they look to. I support President Trump. Voters support President Trump. He is an important voice in our Republican Party, and we look forward to working with him.
That's going to be the guiding ethos for at least House Republicans as they head into 2022. And it's interesting. I mean, all of the House leadership team was, of course, reelected in 2020, even when former President Trump was not. So if you're basing this on what the voters chose, that's a different thing. But the House Republican Conference has clearly decided that their fortunes and their opportunity to retake the majority next year comes and goes with Donald Trump. And Stefanik completes that picture. You know, Liz Cheney's not going away, but she is no longer going to be standing up there at these leadership press conferences deviating from that message.
Yeah. And Michael Steele, for all the talk this past week about how the GOP was in disarray and in chaos, the Republican Party across the country is in many ways ascendant. And I wish this was an original thought, but it's actually political journalist Jeff Greenfield who wrote about it this morning. He says the Republican Party has a structural advantage in the House, the Senate, the Electoral College. The Republican Party controls redistricting in the majority of states, and you've got Republican-led legislatures that are pushing voter suppression. So give us a sense of sort of this disconnect. What's happening here in Washington and what's happening across the country, and to Garrett's point that Donald Trump is really the center of it as Republicans see it.
Well, he is the center of it as far as a lot of Republicans are concerned, not Republicans like myself and others who believe that no party should be beholden to one person or one individual. But you're right. I think Garrett's reporting is spot on. And I think what Jeff Greenfield said, it really makes the point. But here's the rub. People still have to vote.
Yeah.
So you can have all the infrastructure in the world politically, as we saw in 2020 and in 2018. You still have to convince voters to vote for what you're saying and what you're selling. What you saw with Stefanik this morning was Republicans got, at least the leadership got what they wanted. Someone who will not deviate from message, who will go out and continue to say, when asked at any point in time, that Donald Trump was cheated in this election, that, you know, the big lie is a real thing. So that's what they wanted. Now the test comes, even with all those structural advantages that you've laid out. How do you translate that into votes? Because you had that structural advantage in Georgia, and you lost. And so voters still have the final say here. No matter what you think the structure is, voters ultimately have the say. And just don't buy into this idea that because they're changing all of these laws around the country, that somehow voters are just going to stay home and go, well, it takes me now an extra hour to go to the voting polls. They'll just pack another hour into their day and plan to be there. So there's a lot more that's going on nationally. You're absolutely right, than what you may see in Washington. But I wouldn't misread it to think that all of it is an advantage, because voters still have the final